Good Sunday afternoon to you folks. Everything new under the sun. Today I want to take a look at the Temple Institute. And I got a bit sidetracked, to be completely honest, when I started researching the Temple Institute. And I got into the red heifer. And so I'm going to go through a little bit of the Temple Institute, give you a bit of background. There's some interesting stuff about it. But then I want to get into the red heifer because I think the red heifer starts basically a timer, a countdown clock to the general start of the initiation of the sacrifices, the temple sacrifices. Now, the Jews will not sacrifice officially until there's a third temple. They won't sacrifice until they can do it in a third temple, and so that's what we're waiting for. And of course, the Temple Mount is big with the red heifer. Now, this particular keynote presentation is what I've been working on for a while, and it's got my timeline of the current periods that we're in. By the way, I want to make mention that if you have not subscribed yet, please subscribe. And thanks for supporting the channel, to all the people who support the channel and comment and like the videos and share the videos. That's awesome. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Time is short. We are in the last days, and I think this video is going to be pretty interesting for you. If you are interested to see even more evidence of a particular timing of last day's events. And I think the particular timing is coming together. All the evidences, all the lines of evidence, all the prophecies are converging. And this is just one more prophecy that I think, more than the others even, give us a particular timeline leading to the start of the sacrifices in the third temple, and well, the 7-year tribulation, obviously, the start of the 7-year tribulation. Sorry, I was just thinking about my Bible. I need to go to Daniel. I'm going to open up Daniel in a browser here because I want to reference it. So let me pull this up here. So there's references to the start of the sacrifices in Daniel 9, also Daniel 10, and Daniel 11. And so we're going to read a bit of that. But before I get too far ahead of myself, let's go ahead and start talking about the Temple Institute itself. And I will try and remember to get these scriptures in here. So the Temple Institute is an organization that is funded by the public, generally. And their goal is really to get things ready for the third temple. Let's read a bit. And you can go to templeinstitute.org to find out more about it. But the site says, "Welcome to the official website of the Temple Institute in Jerusalem, Israel. The Temple Institute is dedicated to every aspect of the Holy Temple of Jerusalem." And this is why, hold on to that, because we're going to be talking about some of the significant pieces. It goes on, "and the central role fulfilled, and once again, and will once again fulfill," they state for themselves, "in the spiritual well-being of both Israel and all the nations of the world. The Institute's work touches upon history of the Holy Temple's past, and understanding of the present day, and the divine promise of Israel's future. The Institute's activities include education, research, and development." What are they developing? Well, they're developing and have developed all the implements for temple services, which is incredible. The gold menorah, and the wash basins, and the altar, etc. And the altar is kind of the latest thing. The Temple Institute's ultimate goal, they say, is to see Israel rebuild the Holy Temple on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem in accordance with biblical commandments. And so this is their stated goal, to see the rebuilding of the third temple and the initiation of sacrifices. Now, actually, I'm going to hold off on sacrifices. So, in 2015, they actually had an Indiegogo, and there's an image from the page, where they're trying to raise money to create blueprints for the third temple. They wanted to build the third temple. This is the Temple Institute, you can see on the right-hand side there. And they did raise $100,000. And the page says, and you can look at the page, the URL is at the bottom there. "Are you ready for peace we all long for in the Middle East? The third temple in Jerusalem will be a house of prayer for all nations." That's actually what the Bible says. "Every prophet of Israel, without exception, prophesied that the temple would be rebuilt. We're going to take a look at that exclusively from chapters in Daniel. It goes on, ushering a new era of universal harmony and peace and security, and then sudden destruction, of course, comes upon them. The movement to rebuild the Holy Temple was born almost 2,000 years ago at the moment of the Second Temple's destruction. Now, this is where it says where they reached their campaign, August 2015. Our bold campaign to raise $100,000 for preparations of the architectural plans for the Third Temple has been successful, thanks to hundreds of people who have supported this effort. The past Tish B'Av, July 26, 2015, we released a short video showing, for the first time, detailed architectural plans and 3D renditions of the Holy Sanctuary. Now we're going to watch a video here on this page of the plans. So let's have a watch here. This is basically what they envision the temple to be, and they've created the blueprints for this. So these are the blueprints that they have ready since 2015. At a moment's notice, they can go ahead and start building this. They have the blueprints. It's ready to go. They can just start building it. Part of the Temple Institute's goal is awareness as well for the Jewish population, to get people aware of the Third Temple, to get them excited about the Third Temple and the Holy of Holies. And you can see the veil there that was torn in two in this new temple shown there in the red there. There's the menorah, there's the veil, the cherubim that would sit on the mercy seat, and the other instruments of liturgy in the temple. That's the golden lampstand, the menorah, and they have a fully golden, 100% gold menorah ready to go already. And I think you can actually go to the Temple Institute and see it today. Pretty incredible stuff. Now I don't know all the ins and outs, what this higher place is that they go to. Maybe this is the Holy of Holies. I don't know. I'll have to do some more research on exactly what all these rooms are, what they're all intended for. But it's pretty amazing. So that is the blueprint, a visual 3D walkthrough of the blueprint of the Third Temple, and they're pushing for this. And this has been on the books for several years. Since 2015, they've had the blueprints ready to go at a moment's notice. And so you talk about Trump's peace plan, which very interesting details surrounding that, and interesting possibilities and potential. There are some that are saying that Trump's exit from Syria is part of a goodwill gesture to help the peace plan when he brings it in. And so it's interesting that the Temple Institute is behind this all. They have everything ready to go, and I think it's all part of God's plan that he would create an organization that would kind of get everything ready. So as soon as they have the go-ahead to rebuild the Third Temple, the Temple Institute can hop right in, go ahead and do it. And they've got the altar already for the sacrifices, so they're ready to go with sacrifices outside of the red heifer, which we're going to talk about. So just a few details here. Again, I was going to do a whole video about the background of the Temple Institute, and I got sidetracked with the red heifer. We're going to get into that shortly, but since I have this information, let's have a look at it. So this particular one, I'll just read a couple of paragraphs here. Both the restored sacred vessels and the original paintings seen on this site may be viewed in person at the Temple Institute's Holy Visitors Center, so you can go and look at it. The scholars of the Temple Institute have dedicated their lives to raising public awareness and importance of the Holy Temple in the life of all mankind. So Israel's a secular nation, and the Temple Institute's stated goal is to raise awareness so that they want the third temple again. The Temple Institute considers it of primary importance to educate the great significance of Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, the only site in the world that is considered holy by the Jewish people, and the only site in the world which God chose to rest his presence through the establishment of the Holy Temple, it says. All who pray for the fulfillment of biblical prophecies that promise the reestablishment of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem are invited and welcome to become part of Temple Institute's vision and share in these efforts. Now, as a Christian, it would definitely be hard for me as a Christian to support something like this Indiegogo. Well, it wouldn't be hard, it would be incorrect, because ultimately salvation is through Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the Messiah they did not recognize 2,000 years ago. So to support a third temple, which is not the way of salvation now, would be anti-God, effectively anti-New Testament, anti-Jesus, if you will, to support that. So it's not something we support, but it's fascinating to watch it. The Jews believe it. They believe they need it to cover their sins. They don't obviously recognize Jesus Christ yet, and that's part of what Gog Magog, Ezekiel 38 and 39 is, to really turn Israel back towards God, and for them to recognize that He is their God and He is in control. And ultimately, though, they will recognize the Messiah when the Antichrist causes the abomination of desolation in the third temple, and then they will realize, oh, this isn't our Messiah at all, and then they will actually understand once and for all. So, but you can see at the bottom there the gold menorah, so you can go to the Temple Institute and look at that, and of course they have what I would suggest is a replica of the Ark of the Covenant with the cherubs on it. The image on the left here, that is the Temple Institute's image. They're superimposing the third temple over top the Dome of the Rock. And many believe actually that's not where it's supposed to go, although they would have you believe that the Dome of the Rock has to be destroyed. And honestly, in this geopolitical climate, with the Arabs into Islam in general, there's no way that would ever happen, the Dome of the Rock. I mean, that would just be World War III. But if you look on the right-hand image, you see the Golden Gate there, and that's the Eastern Gate, and that is directly in line with the number 14 you see in the middle there, where it says raised platform. I don't think I can point it out, but it's basically above the Dome of the Rock. There's an area there that there's no buildings on, except a little roof over a raised portion of rock on the flat there on the top of the Temple Mount. And that is directly opposite of the Eastern Gate. And many say that the temple actually has to be built basically in line with that Eastern Gate, and there's no Dome of the Rock there, so they're not fighting with Islam, or they don't have to tear anything down. It's an empty area, effectively. And it's because of the priests who used to, and this does relate to the red heifer. It says, the Eastern Gate is an important gate on the Temple Mount, as on Yom Kippur, the scapegoat that was chosen by the high priest in front of the temple would have been led through the court of women, down a stairway, and through the Shushan Gate and into the Kidron Valley. It says, Numbers 19 stipulated that in order for the people to be purified, a red heifer should be sacrificed, its ashes collected and put in a container of water. The Mishnah said the priest that was consecrated to burn the red heifer would leave the Temple Mount with the heifer and go through the Eastern Gate, the Golden Gate there. Eastern Gate, go through the Eastern Gate to the Mount of Olives. And so this particular site I'm reading from doesn't necessarily agree that that the temple has to be directly in line with it. But if the priests have to go through there with the red heifer, then it would make sense that The temple itself would be more in line with the eastern gate, which would be nice and easy. It would be convenient, if you will, for them to set up a third temple there alongside the Dome of the Rock, so they didn't have to upset Islam. And in fact, if this is a sacred place to God, then He wouldn't let any other religion desecrate, the Holy of Holies, the place that was existing, that the first and second temple were over. So He effectively wouldn't allow the Dome of the Rock to be put over that place. So conveniently, maybe the Dome of the Rock is actually in the wrong place, not in the Holy of Holies, and that actual location sits to the north of it, basically, where that number 14 is on the right side. So it's an interesting setup, and people have spoken about that before. It would certainly be convenient if that was the case. All right, so now let's get into the red heifer. I want to talk about, let's see, go to this one. They have a whole page on the Temple Institute website about the red heifer. The divine ordinance of purification through the ashes of the red heifer as outlined in Numbers chapter 19. And so this is for the covering, of the sin of the Jews in the Old Testament. This is not for our day. Jesus Christ died on the cross for our sins, and He did it once and for all. We don't have to sacrifice anymore, but of course the Jews do. So, but the idea of where the Bible speaks of the Antichrist ceasing sacrifices, well, we get that from Daniel 9 is just one of them. Let me go to Daniel 9:27 says, "And he shall confirm a covenant with 1 week, and in the midst of the week, in the middle of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease." And so this leader comes in and causes the sacrifice to cease. Now, there's no sacrificing right now. Why? Because they don't have a red heifer that has been purified. And there's some really fascinating things about the red heifer, specifically a timeline of events that has to occur, or a certain period of time that has to transpire before things can get rolling here, which really gives us an indicator as to how far off we are from the rebuilding of the third temple. So that's what Daniel 9 says. Let's go to Daniel 10. There's a reference of the ceasing of the sacrifices in Daniel 10. Let's see. I wrote this down in the back of my Bible this morning. And I'm on my computer now, and I don't have that right in front of me. So verse 10? No. Let's see. Of course, I can't find it. Maybe it's not in 10. I thought it was in 10. 11. Let me just check 11 and see here if I can find it here. Let's see. Come on, where is this? Fine, sacrifice. Okay, here it is. 31. And arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. So, and there's one more. I think it's in 12. Let me see if I can find it in 12. So, chapter after chapter, sacrifice. Yes. So Daniel chapter 12, verse 11 says, "And from that time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days." So speaking of the ending of the sacrifices that were occurring in the third temple. Remember, the Jews won't sacrifice unless they have a third temple. That means A, there has to be a third temple, and B, there has to be sacrifices, and C, there has to be a red heifer that's available to sacrifice. And that's what we're going to get into. But that ceasing of the sacrifices kicks off the last half of the 7-year tribulation. All right, so let's get to it. Read a little bit about the heifer. The heifer must be 3 years old, and this is key. This is where we find the countdown timer, and I've got a timeline that we're going to take a look at. The heifer must be 3 years old and in perfect redness. This means that the presence of as few as 2 hairs of any color will render it invalid. So right now, as far as I know, we have one red heifer candidate that is so far completely red, so far as I have heard so far. And remember, they can't start sacrifices unless they have a pure red heifer. So if this one that they have now has some white hairs on it, they're going to render it invalid, and they're going to have to wait for a new one to come, which is going to push the timeline off. So what does this say here? Even its hooves must be red. It must also be totally free of any physical blemish or defect, whether internal or external. It says, although the red heifer is not a sacrifice per se, for it is not slaughtered in the temple, it is forbidden that the heifer should possess any of those blemishes which render any sacrifice invalid. Remember, they slaughter it on the mountaintop. Such as those enumerated in the book of Leviticus. The red heifer also has an additional unique requirement. It must have never been used to perform any physical labor. Look at the bottom there. The commandment calls for an animal to be a heifer, a female, that is 3 or 4 years old, although an older animal could also be used. Since the verse instructs us to take a heifer, we do not purchase a calf and wait for it to grow older while in our custody. And take a heifer means that the act of acquisition has to take place while the animal is a heifer. However, if a red calf is available, a price can be set with its owner, and the transaction can be concluded. So let's see the article about the red heifer that confirms the red heifer. So a red heifer was born indeed in September 2018. This is an article in breakingisraelnews.com. You can see the link in the bottom left there. Temple Institute announces birth of red heifer. So last Tuesday, the article says the Temple Institute's red heifer program was blessed with results. An entirely red female calf was born, paving the way for reestablishing temple service and marking the final stage of redemption. So September 2018, remember that date. This is the kickoff of a countdown timer. And if this is a pure animal without blemish, then it has to become at least 3 years old before it can be sacrificed. They have no other sacrifice valid that they can perform at this time. So these the sacrifices in the third temple, which are to be stopped by the Antichrist at the abomination of desolation, the ones that are caused to be ceased, cannot start next year. They can't start in 2019. They can't start in 2020. Because the only valid pure red heifer that we have right now won't be old enough, won't be 3 to 4 years old at that point in time. 1 week after its birth, the newborn red heifer was certified by a board of rabbis as fulfilling all the biblical requirements. You see at the bottom there, the rabbis emphasized that the heifer could, at any time, acquire a blemish, rendering it unsuitable. They will be inspecting the calf periodically to verify its condition. So they have this calf. It is spotless. Remember, so far the calf is spotless, and that, what does that stand for? It means free of sin, because you need a perfect sacrifice to pay for our sin. And who was that perfect sacrifice? That was actually by Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago. He died on the cross. He was perfect, and he was the only person that could die for our sins. You can only have a perfect sacrifice to pay for all the sins of mankind. So let's look at the timeline. Let's look at when this calf was born, and what is the earliest timeline that could exist for them to be able to start sacrifices, and how does this blend in with the peace plan, with the 112 popes prophecy, with the 70 shepherds prophecy of Benjamin Netanyahu being the last leader of the people of Israel, etc. Well, it's interesting. It lines up exactly with what I've been saying all along about the year 2021. So let's look at this. So the red heifer was born September 2018, just a couple months ago. 2018 is 70 years. That's the 70-year anniversary of Israel becoming a nation, which is an important year because that's the natural age of man that God gives man. Man is allowed 70 years, but the verse goes on, unless by reason of strength, they get fourscore years, which is 80 years. So by reason of strength, Israel will last another 10 years, and then that ends up being the end of 6,000 years of man on this planet, and basically 2,000 years from the death of Christ. The year 2028 is 2,000 years almost exactly from the date of the death of Jesus Christ on the cross, which is obviously the milestone, the significant event in the life of Christ, paying for our sin and kicking off the last 2 days, the last 2,000 years of the history of mankind on this planet. So where are we? We are in 2018. So you have the red heifer that was born. The red heifer has to be at least 3 years old before they can sacrifice it. So that means they can't start sacrifices, which will probably be basically start in and around the start of the 7-year tribulation, because probably the peace plan is going to come, and what they're going to do is they're going to divide Jerusalem, and they're going to say, look, Jews, look, Israel, if you agree to this peace plan, we will let you rebuild your third temple and start sacrificing. And that's what they're trying to get. That's what they're trying to move ahead with. So we add 3 years as a minimum. You can see the start date there, where I went to time and date calculator to add 3 years to a particular date. So I just selected, September 1st. Just it's going to be plus or minus a couple days, whatever. But you add 3 years to September 1st, 2018, and what do you get? Well, you get Wednesday, September 1st, in the year 2021. Isn't that interesting? The year that I think the 7-year tribulation starts, because that's 7 years off of the last of 6,000 years, the year 2028, happens to also be the year that the red heifer that we currently have, that the Temple Institute is currently raising, that's the year it becomes eligible to be sacrificed, and they won't sacrifice unless there's a third temple. So the year 2021, interestingly, at the end of it, in September, which is obviously a kind of a high holy period for the Jewish people, lots of things going on, fall feasts, etc. All this is converging for September in the year 2021. And that calf, if still pure, will finally be eligible. Now, if this calf is found to be impure, if there's hairs on it or whatever, white hairs and not red, well, they would have to wait for the next calf. So that would kick off the number of years. Say if a calf was born in the year 2019, next year, a couple of weeks from now, then that would push out the time at which they could actually start sacrifices by a whole other year, if not more, depending on when that calf is actually born. So it's interesting. This could be it. We could be looking at basically the countdown timer being this calf. Wouldn't it be interesting that if there was a peace deal, everybody would be saying peace, peace, peace and safety, and sharing gifts, and they would quickly erect the third temple, and they would want to start sacrifices as soon as possible, and maybe that occurs in the month of September, October of the year 2021, along with maybe a temporary temple in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount. Wouldn't that be interesting? And what does this do? Well, this sets up the ability for the Antichrist to come in and stop sacrifices at the 3.5-year mark. It would make sense that the sacrifices would go on for a little while, once a year for 3.5 years, and then the Antichrist would say, okay, stop and worship me, and the abomination of desolation happens in the middle of the 7-year tribulation, and that's when the day of the Lord starts, etc., and vengeance and judgment starts coming down at the middle mark of the 7-year tribulation. So the last 3.5 years are basically judgment from God raining down on the earth. And so this is what I think is interesting. You could possibly, and it would be interesting to do so. Now, the Bible says we won't know the day or the hour. But who says, and certainly the Bible does not specify, that we can't know the month, the year, the decade, the time, the period, the Moedim, the appointed time, or even maybe the festival. I'm sure that, boy, now I have to go and study that one. In terms of the actual festival, would this be I guess this would be the Passover. I guess this would be on the Passover. I'll have to I don't want to say anything out of turn and be wrong about that. I didn't look into that. I'll have to figure out exactly what festival this occurs on. Um, I assume it would be on a specific high holy day of festival. Um, but suffice it to say, I think this is very interesting, and I could possibly start just a, just an interesting, for interest's sake, countdown timer from September 1st, 2018, 3 years, and if in 3 years, when that red heifer if it's still valid, um, and when that red heifer is then able to be slaughtered, if pure, and after it turns 3 years old, do they actually sacrifice it in the third temple? It's interesting that it lines up with 2021. All these other prophecies, the prophecies of the 112th Pope, we're on the 112th Pope right now, which is extra biblical prophecy, absolutely no doubt, but interesting nonetheless. That looks to be aligning with Bible prophecy. You also have the prophecy of the 70 shepherds from the book of Enoch, which says there's going to be 70 leaders of the people of Israel, and there will only be 70 leaders. And wouldn't you know it, Benjamin Netanyahu happens to be the 70th leader. That means there can be no other leaders of Israel after Benjamin Netanyahu. So that kind of puts a cap on the timeline. Benjamin Netanyahu's, what is he, 70 years old? He's not going to be around for another 40 years. So if that's true, there can't be any other leaders in Israel. And it'll probably be a lot shorter than that, because I think he's on his fourth prime ministership, fourth time in office, third, fourth. I'll have to go back. It's actually in one of these slides up here, but. It does, and he's been very troubled in terms of his position as prime minister. People are trying to kick him out left, right, and center, but somehow miraculously he is staying in power. So I think it's pretty fascinating when you look at that. You look at the date there, and if this is a pure red heifer, this means it would make sense that if 2021 is the time, then we would have to have a red heifer on, in September of the year 2018 or prior to it, so that it's ready, and it has to be between 3 and 4 years old. So it can't be too old. It can't be born in 2015, because it would then be too old for the sacrifices. So it just so lines up, perfect timing for the birth of this red heifer, and it's the only one that I know of that's currently under watch. Let me know in the comments if you know of any others. But I thought this was fascinating, and does it herald into the end of the world? I think it puts a countdown timer, a countdown clock, on some of these things. And maybe this is the first item that you can actually say, now I can actually start counting down. Months, weeks, days. Again, we don't know the day or the hour of the rapture event, but the Lord says we should recognize the times and the seasons, and we should have a good understanding and be able to speculate at least somewhat on when the 7 tribulation is. We should know when the time is near. We should know that wars and rumors of wars are happening. Pestilences are occurring. Earthquakes in diverse places. We should recognize that as Bible prophecy being fulfilled. Here's a headline, which I think is interesting. I think the world sees it too. End of the world fears. First red heifer born in Israel in 2,000 years fulfills prophecy. The birth of a red heifer in Israel is said to be the first in 2,000 years and a viable, quote-unquote, candidate to fulfill biblical prophecy, and it has sparked fears of the end of the world. That was from September 12th, 2018, you can see there. That was from the express.co.uk, link on the bottom there. But I think they're absolutely true. This should cause people to say, is this it? Are we in the time? And I think if you look at all the other converging prophecies and then you add this one on top of it, all of a sudden, this looks like a countdown timer to the third temple. I'll be absolutely honest. I think this effectively is the last 3 years prior to the reinstatement of temple sacrifices, the temple itself, the third temple, and the sacrificing of the red heifer. And that means in that period of time, economic collapse has to happen. Ezekiel 38-39 has to happen. Gog and Magog, invasion of Israel. God has to show his power You also have Isaiah 17, the destruction of Damascus. I think all these things are going to be coming to pass, and things are escalating. We also see birth pains increasing with economic trouble increasing. Look at the stock market over the last month since October really, and still, I think the Dow. I just checked it today, and it was down 400 points from close on Friday. And so we see birth pains increasing in frequency and intensity. We're going to see economic birth pains. We're going to see larger fluctuations in the economy. We're going to see a lack of confidence. And I think the economic collapse is really what allows and kicks off the rest of the stuff. You see the U.S. pull out in Syria. That enables Russia to put its troops there and get ready for the Gog-Magog invasion. It enables them. It also fulfills Bible prophecy by the fact that Western nations aren't a part of those prophecies. Ezekiel 38. There is no United States mentioned there. The United States is not backing up Israel. The only reference is maybe the young lions of Tarshish basically asking questions saying, have you come to take a spoil? But they're nowhere to be seen. And that tells me that um, either they were taken out by an EMP blast or World War III, which doesn't seem to be mentioned in Bible prophecy. If World War III in that manner was in Bible prophecy, would be pretty obvious. What I think is more obvious, and what I think is required for the mark of the beast system to come into effect, which comes into effect in and around the same time as the year 2021, is an economic collapse. You need an economic collapse to push the current world fiat currency out of the way. You need an economic collapse to take Western nations, specifically the United States, out of power so that they can't defend Israel. And that's for God's own purposes, so that He can show His power to them, and so that they don't rely on themselves or anybody else. Although, of course, the IDF has come out and says, saying that we are going to defend Israel ourselves, but they will be overwhelmed at some point. So I think the red heifer, guys, this is very interesting, and I'll add to this. I'll add to my slideshow as I get more detail on the subject. I don't want to say the Lord's coming back at such and such in time. What I do want to say is that all the prophecies are converging. This is one more to add to my growing keynote PowerPoint listing of Bible prophecies that are converging. And now I think we have a countdown timer. Now I think we have a red heifer that seems to give us a countdown, a timer of things that are coming upon the earth. So I'll leave it there for today, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.